I am very happy to introduce our presenter today, Dr. Wallace Southerland III. He will discuss his vision for student affairs at Michigan Tech, as well as characteristics of Millennials and Generation Z. He will share best practices for engagement and collaboration with these groups. Dr. Southerland is the Vice President of Student Affairs and the Dean of Students at Michigan Tech as of July 1st of this year. In his new role, Dr. Southerland is responsible for the Division of Student Affairs, which includes 9 departments that deliver academic support, out-of-class programming, career services, mental health and wellness services, leadership development, community service experiences, housing, and other services that promote lifelong learning and success. Prior to joining Michigan Tech, Dr. Southerland was Associate Vice President of Student Affairs at Salisbury University in Maryland and Associate Dean of Students and Director of Minority Student Affairs at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Over the course of 3 decades of leadership roles in the higher ed community, Dr. Southerland has devoted his career to working with students, especially first generation, low income, disabled, veteran, and historically underrepresented students. A native of Washington, D.C., Dr. Southerland is married to Medra Roberts, whom we have all now met, well, virtually. Medra is from Long Island, New York, and they have 1 daughter at Urbana-Champaign, where Medra is visiting. So I ask you all, Dr. Southerland received his BA in English and his master's in counseling from the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut, and his PhD in education, policy planning, and administration from the University of Maryland at College Park. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Southerland. He will first give his presentation, and then we will open it up to question and answers. And I'm sure we'll have plenty of time for discussion. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Southerland, for presenting to us today. And I hope all of you will join me in welcoming Dr. Southerland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joan, for the introduction. I appreciate it. Good morning again to everyone, especially if I haven't said good morning to you yet. I really do appreciate this opportunity to just talk a little bit with you, to have a conversation, if you will, about why I joined the Michigan Tech Houghton communities, as well as some thoughts about what I'd like to do moving forward in my role, and then talk to you about the different characteristics of millennials versus Gen Z, and then close with some thoughts about how to engage with those populations.
Dr. Southerland?
Yes.
I think with your presentation, the PowerPoint that is being viewed, if you pull down under slideshow, you can have it say, yeah, there you go.
Is this better?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, you're quite welcome. So why I chose tech? So I chose tech for a few reasons. And as you might imagine, as an African-American in person, I have to often explain, how did I get up to Houghton? How did I choose Michigan Tech? So I chose tech for some very specific reasons. One is because of tech's commitment to using technology to solve some of the global problems that we are facing in society. And I really thought that that was a very human-centered kind of vision, and I wanted to be a part of that. Also, tech's commitment to preparing students to create a future that is just, sustainable, and prosperous. Those values are completely aligned with what I believe as an individual, as well as a person of faith. Also, because of tech's commitment to improving access to science, technology, engineering, and math, what we refer to as STEM in higher education, for women and historically underrepresented minorities. The comprehensive nature of the Student Affairs Division. The division includes professional departments that I've not supervised in my career. So taking on this position really represented professional growth and opportunity for me. And then finally, Tech's commitment to diversity and inclusion. I came to the position eyes wide open. I know that Houghton, I know that Tech are not as diverse as I would like for it to be, nor is it as diverse as probably you would like for it to be. So I'm hoping that my career and life experiences can start to turn that around. And working with my colleague and your fellow parishioner, Dr. Wayne Gersey, we can both collaborate and build allies to address the diversity and inclusion within Houghton as well as the Michigan Tech community. So Student Affairs mission statement. Our mission statement is to prepare students to create a future, and we make their success our highest priority. So, and from a very broad perspective, we have very high expectations for Tech students. We, of course, expect them to get a job, but we also expect them to do great things in their lives. So we want them to go out and change the world, to tackle global problems using their knowledge and skills. So here's some of the departments that are within Student Affairs to give you some sense of exactly, well, what is it that a Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students do? So historically, we tend to think of Dean of Students as the disciplinarian, if you will. That is not the current contemporary version of Dean of Students positions in colleges and universities. So I supervise the Wallace Student Center, Center for Student Success. That's where we have academic skills workshops, the tutoring services. We coach students academically. We talk to them about how to become successful academically at the university. The Student Leadership and Involvement Center, that's where we talk to students about the importance of leadership development, developing service-oriented skills. We also work with our members of the fraternity and sorority organizations on campus. Career services, fairly self-explanatory. That's where we prepare them for not just how to get a job, but also how to keep that job. So we teach them those soft and hard skills, how to problem solve, how to think critically, how to appreciate and work with people who are from very different backgrounds. I supervise our housing on campus, our academic and community conduct. That is the only little department in the division that actually deals with student infractions, if you will. Student disability services. We work with students who come to the university, and if they have a disability, we work with them to make sure that we have the appropriate documentation to get them legally required reasonable accommodations to ensure that they are successful. International programs and services. We work with international students. Our Center for Student Mental Health and Well-Being. That's where we make sure students are mentally healthy and well. They are learning resilience and coping skills. The Dean of Students Office, that's just a catch-all name that supervises a few of these other departments. Orientation, that's where we really make sure students have a very positive, exciting introduction and transition into the university. It all starts with how we orient students into the university, and that can often make a difference if they decide to stay or decide to leave the university. And Student Affairs Information Systems, that's essentially our technological arm of the department. So if I want to send out a message via email to all of the students, I go to my information systems department to do that. If I want to get some particular data or research on student populations, I would go to our information systems office. So for better or worse, I'm responsible for all of this in Student Affairs at Michigan Tech. So the vision thing, as you might imagine, being the new person, people are often asking me, well, what's your vision? What are you going to do? What's your vision? What's your vision? And I've been very honest with people, and I'll be honest with you. I think that it may be a little bit presumptuous and probably somewhat irresponsible to come into a new position and start developing a vision and you barely know what things are. You barely know people's names. So I've made an intentional decision to slow down a little bit, invest time in getting to know the Michigan Tech culture, the Houghton community. So I found two scriptures that kind of back me up on that. The first, as you see here, is where there's no vision, the people perish. And so certainly over time, I will be developing a vision as I put all of the data I'm gathering about the community, then I'll have a plan to go forward. The second scripture, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And that's where I am right now. I'm trying to exercise humility as I acknowledge what I do not know and understand about the institution or the community. I'm trying to be very gentle in the way that I approach individual as a new person. And I'm intentionally trying to demonstrate kindness in my daily interactions with people, especially since our students experience so many difficulties and crises. I'm told that since September started, quite a few of our students have suffered some kind of tragedy somewhere in their lives. And it's not just COVID related, it's because of family illness. And I have personally called at least 4 students, 5 students actually, to give them my condolences on the loss of their parent. So that's what I'm investing my time in. And as I shared earlier, this past Friday, I celebrated my 100 days in the Houghton community and at Michigan Tech. However, over the course of the past 15 or so years of my career, I've established what I'm calling my professional compass and some guiding priorities. So no matter where I am, no matter what position I have, these are my guiding priorities, my guiding principles. So as long as I'm at Tech, these are the priorities that will guide me. And some may say, well, that's the same thing as a vision. I will accept that. The first is, I really want to promote and invest in a culture of staff excellence, diversity, inclusion, and sense of belonging. It's important to me that staff have the skills, the knowledge, the technology, and the resources that they need to be successful, to be their absolute best. It's important to me that we have a diverse and inclusive staff that not just look like Tech, because we know that will look predominantly white, but also look like the world in which students are actually living today and will live in the future. The next priority is to promote and invest in a culture of student excellence, diversity, inclusion, and sense of belonging. So in my mind, if we have an excellent staff, that will naturally lead to an excellent student body. And to me, excellence is defined as so much more than, are they on the dean's list? Do they have a high GPA? It also means, are they making good, positive, healthy life choices? Do they know how to problem solve and think critically? Are they resilient? Do they know how to navigate the institution, for example? And we also want to make sure that our student body reflects the world that's evolving today, which is becoming far more diverse than the world many of you grew up in, or even the world I grew up in. And we want them to feel like they are connected to Tech and the Houghton community, and that they belong at Tech and in the Houghton community. Third priority is to promote and invest in a culture of internal and external engagement. So in my mind, it's important that we not just work together within student affairs across those organizational boundaries, breaking down those silos that keep us separated, but to also work across the campus with academic advisors, with the athletic department, with the admissions office, with the advancement office, and so many others that share our passion and vision and values. But it also means working outside of Michigan Technological University by working with, for example, K through 12 or nonprofit communities. I would also love to work with faith-based organizations to make sure that we are not forgetting about the importance of students' spiritual development. The next priority is promoting and investing in a culture of planning and assessment. We have to have a plan to get from point A to point B. So part of what I'll be doing as a leader is to make sure all of the departments have some kind of roadmap or a conceptual framework that helps them to implement whatever their goals are. And assessment, how do we know what's working in the department? How do we know what's not working? Do we know why it's working? Or do we know it's why it's not working, for example? And I'll start to ask questions such as, what are your outcomes? What's the evidence that students are learning? How do we know that we're making an impact on students' experience? What's the return on investment given the public resources that we're responsible within student affairs? And I'll be using that data, if you will, to help tell the story of what we're doing and how we are impacting students. And then lastly, this priority was actually influenced since joining Tech. Promote and invest in a culture of philanthropy and development. We're going to need money. We're going to need money to help us to achieve all of our grand ideas that we have in mind. So once my vision is solidified, we're going to need the support of the community to give to student scholarships, to give to our student emergency funds, for example, to give to student study abroad experiences, to give to staff professional development, to give to our food pantry so that we can help students who may have food insecurity, to help students who may be struggling with finding housing or have housing insecurity. So those are the 5 priorities that would guide everything that I do, every decision that I make. And I've presented these priorities to my leadership team. They have adopted these priorities, and they understand that my expectation of them is that every programmatic, operational, and budgetary decision, we have to link back to these priorities. So although these priorities will be the same every year that I'm at Tech, each of these priorities will have an individual goal or activity or initiative associated with it. Those would change annually, but not the priorities. So now I just want to talk a little bit about the millennials. So our millennials are those who are born between this time period of 1980 to 1995. There's a little bit disagreement among individuals who studies the different generations. So sometimes it's 1977 to 1981, or it's 1980 to 1995. So, but the consensus is 1980 to 1995 is the safest bet when we're talking about the millennial generation. So some characteristics of our millennials. They're good at accepting change, for example. So if you are working with them or have them in your congregation, it's probably easier to get that generation to accept some of the change that you may be sharing with them. So they understand that things don't stay the same for long and change is a natural part of life. They're a very curious group of people. So they want to know, well, how does this work? How do I learn? How do, where did you get this information from? How do I get more information? They're very team-centered. So think about, as you are engaging them in your congregational activities, are you focusing on collaborative activities, or are you thinking more of people working individually? Millennials will want to be together with someone in a very team-centered environment. They want to hear from other people. They want to know what others are thinking. They crave feedback. So they're going to want to know, well, tell me how I'm doing. Tell me what you think about my work. Where am I doing well? Where am I not doing well? Give me feedback, give me feedback. And for some reason, for this one, I keep thinking of, this is probably a group that will definitely appreciate getting that certificate as a sign of giving them praise for the work that they're doing. So keep that in mind when you work with this generation. Be prepared to offer them a lot of feedback to keep them focused. And I found this interesting. They're the generation that love our public libraries. So they're probably the ones who are giving to our public libraries. And while it's not really clear as to why that particular generation are visiting our libraries so much, that is a characteristic of the millennial generation. So they're not likely to be the ones hanging around cyber cafes, for example, or worrying about where their iPad is or what's on their laptop. This is not likely to be that generation. So if you want to gather in a public library to have a service or to have some kind of event, they may very well embrace that, for example. The Generation Zers or the iGens or the Centennial folks, that's the group that's born between 1996 and right now. So some characteristics about them. Interestingly, they made up 1/10 of the 2020 electorate. So I jokingly like to say it's their fault, whatever happened, you know. They are the last generation that is predominantly white. And that is a reality that we all have to embrace as we start interacting with people from different racial, ethnic, and other types of backgrounds. Racial diversity is very important to Generation Z, and we ought to celebrate that. They're going to be paying attention to where are all the people of color? Where are the women? You know, why aren't we more diverse? That's going to have an impact on them, and they may disengage if they do not perceive a setting as being racially diverse. And if they are already racially diverse, embrace that, celebrate it, acknowledge it. Don't be apprehensive about acknowledging the racial diversity in your setting. Find a way to capitalize and leverage that diversity in your setting. They are technology focused. Use it. They may not spend a lot of time in the library, but they may go to the library on their technology. So if you have services or certain kinds of activities that you can incorporate through technology, or have them use their technology to deliver a presentation, think about using that. Do you have some kind of computer stations, for example, in your facility? Are you using technology to convey your services? If not, give some thought to that. Are you using virtual scriptures to send daily scriptures and inspirational messages through iPhones and emails and text messages? If not, think about using technology to connect with people spiritually. They are career focused, and we need to acknowledge that. That is one of the most difficult impressions to convey to faculty, for example, because they, rightfully so, see themselves as not just being about career, but teaching students how to think and process and analyze. But the bottom line is, when I send my child to school, in my mind, I'm thinking, you better get a job afterwards. And you better be able to take care of yourself. That's why you're going to whatever institution that you're going to. So let's not be ashamed to acknowledge that our students are coming to our universities because they want to get a good job. And Michigan Tech has a 90+% placement rate. So the reality is students are coming to Tech obviously for our academic reputation, but make no mistake, they are also coming to Tech because our career placement brand. So how do you incorporate career development, workplace issues into your services, into your sermons, into your Sunday schools, into your lectures, and so forth with students? They are the loneliest generation, and this is what concerns me the most as the Vice President and Dean of Students. Obviously, we need to pray for anyone who's experiencing loneliness, who's suffering in silence, but praying is not enough. We have to actually do something about that. We have to respond to that. We have to constantly come up with ways to create socialization opportunities, to create fellowship opportunities, bring people together to celebrate, to listen, to share, to understand, to grieve, to mourn, to pray, to sing, to worship. We need to find ways to get through to people, to better understand how are they actually doing, how are they actually feeling. And if we can get to that, then we can talk to people about the importance of coming to Christ. They're also financially minded. They are very mindful that a lot of their parents experience financial difficulties in life, especially during the Great Recession, where people lost jobs, they lost homes, they lost savings accounts, retirement accounts. So because Generation Z witnessed that, they are intent on never experiencing that. So we should be talking to them about money management, financial literacy, how to manage their accounts, how to even write checks. And by incorporating these kinds of life skills into your service, you're not taking away from spiritual development. You are responding to the whole need of the individual, which I think is also Christ-centered. So some closing thoughts to offer you for promoting spiritual development in faith-based settings. So I try to ground as much of this in the scripture as possible out of respect for who you are and what you do. And the scripture that I found that I thought was appropriate was this one. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. I see the work that I do as not just having a job. Obviously, I need a job to pay my bills, but it is so much more than that to me. The work that I do with students, with parents, within the communities, to me, it's my service, it's my calling, it's my ministry. I'm just blessed to actually get paid for doing my ministry. So here's some thoughts. Create a welcoming environment that is anchored in a spirit of God's universal love for all people. And it seems like you're already doing that as a Universalist Unitarian fellowship, where you're welcoming people from all kinds of backgrounds. But make sure that in addition to the language that you're using, that your materials are also welcoming and inclusive. Also make sure that your physical space is reflective of the people and the heroes that we celebrate. So we should be seeing pictures and artifacts and murals that reflect the diversity of people coming into your space. Being mindful of separating behaviors from the human being. And again, it sounds like you're already doing that. A lot of times what get in the way of getting people to come to Christ is that we're just being overly judgmental. We are judging them. And we have to separate the fact that God may not like the behavior, but he loves the individual. And we have to constantly send that message to students and anyone that we're trying to attract to Christ. Message that everyone can and will succeed in life. So part of what you're doing should be based on the fact that, yes, you, the individual, can be successful, and our faith-based space is going to help you do that, rather than seeing people as coming to us with deficits, with problems. Oh, they're homeless. Oh, they are poor, for example. Oh, they're first generation. They don't know any better. So let's not focus on those deficits that can shackle people, but let's focus on the assets that every human being brings into the space. This next one is a big one. Collaborate with local higher education institutions to develop spiritual development programs. In the student affairs profession, we tend to have an overarching student development model in working with students. And in that student development model, we focus on issues such as health and wellness, career development, social development, cultural enrichment. We also focus on spiritual development and other characteristics that relate to wellness in the whole person. So I don't want to shy away from the fact that a lot of our students are students of faith. And when they come to Tech or come to Houghton, we should not ignore that spiritual dimension of our students. So you should be reaching out to me and to Finlandia and to other universities to talk about how can we collaborate to develop students' spiritual identity. And then lastly, I'm encouraging you to maintain that mindfulness about the diversity and of all the characteristics in those you are serving or working with. So whether they're baby boomers or millennials or Gen Z, be mindful of what that means to that particular generation group. Just like you should be mindful of what it means to be an African American or a Hispanic or a Native American, someone who's from Houghton, who is not from Houghton, who's from the Upper Peninsula, who is not from the Upper Peninsula, someone from the LGBTQ community. And so what that means is we have to constantly be aware of who's our population, who's standing in front of us right now in this moment, and how do we respond to that? So part of my job at the university to make sure students stay at Tech and graduate from Tech is to keep the campus mindful that our students are very complex and they bring whole, comprehensive, complex identities with them to the university. We have to be more concerned than just about their GPA, their high school, their test score that they're bringing in. We need to be mindful of the spirit that they're bringing in, their racial background, their income background, their cultural heritage, and other kinds of identities that students bring with them. So with that, thank you for your time. I hope this has been enlightening and helpful. I look forward to questions and conversation.